There's no secret that if you've been a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or have been playing the game for a long time, you know that there is a problem with the ability for Konami to be able to get to new players because of the game being so complicated. And I came across this video on my recommended solving Yu-Gi-Oh's new player problem. I have not watched this yet, and I'm interested to see what the take for SodaTCG is over here. So please go show them some love in the pinned comment description down below. We're going to be reacting to their video today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's see what he has to say over here.
This is my video about solving Yu-Gi-Oh's new player problem. So Yu-Gi-Oh definitely has a new player problem, and if you're not aware of the problem...
And I'm sorry, guys, it's going to be one of those types of videos where my face cam starts getting in the way. It looks like if we're going to start having text on the screen over here, so unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with that.
I would highly recommend watching Raren's video, where he goes through and tries to learn Yu-Gi-Oh himself as a Hearthstone player. If you don't want to watch the whole video, though, you can watch MBT's review video of Raren's video, which does a pretty good job illustrating the points he makes about the new player problems in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Well, obviously, like, the game's overly complicated, and it is nothing like it used to be when everybody was actually starting to play this game. It's beyond impossible to get into the game nowadays, so I think I got the gist of it.
The brief summary of the video is that Yu-Gi-Oh is extremely hard to learn as a new player unless you are already been introduced to the game by somebody else who is already familiar with the game of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, but even then, like, if we're talking, like, depending on when you're getting into the game, because the game is so vastly different from the classic era.
This, however, especially nowadays, is not good enough for you to learn a game from somebody who already knows it, because that already works for every other game that you could already have somebody else teach you. There are lots of other ways you can teach a player the game without having someone else to explain it, solved by many other card games. Magic, for example, has a very gradual learning curve that helps introduce a player to higher and higher levels of play slowly over their time playing.
Now, I have never had any experience playing with Magic, but I have heard this type of thing. Magic is definitely a lot easier to get into, and a lot of people have a fun time, you know, learning the game well. I would imagine that if you're trying to learn Yu-Gi-Oh, you'll want to, like, blow your brains out.
The game. Where most players start playing Magic is on the kitchen table, maybe with a parent, maybe with a friend, maybe with a sibling. You're going to start playing Magic because you think it's cool to play and you want to try it out. Magic cards almost all work for this kitchen table level of play, but it's definitely noteworthy that Magic prints cards for Timmies or players who want some big, splashy, cool effect. I
didn't know that they did that. That's pretty cool. But again, look at the difference in text right there compared to something like a Yu-Gi-Oh card.
May not be very competitively viable. The natural progression from playing on kitchen table is playing Commander. This way you can fit more people into playing at the same time, as it's a multiplayer format, and it's still relatively casual, but has a more focus on bigger effects or longer lasting games, giving you more access to the game than you would if you were just playing for the first time. Commander does an alright job not only establishing the large collection of cards that you are allowed to play within the game of Magic the Gathering, but also can help introduce you to new people, as by being a multiplayer format, you will encounter lots more players if you're playing Commander at something like a local game store.
Interesting. I never really, I don't know anything about Magic, and I could definitely see that's working. And by the way, while we're talking about this, I'm a big fan of card artwork, and we have videos on that in the channel if you're interested. These are very, very pretty. I've never looked at Magic the Gathering cards before. I've just heard about Magic. I have a cousin that's very into Magic, and I've just never really given it a chance.
It's also noteworthy to mention that the price amount that you put into the game increases over time as you play the game more and more. Kitchen table, you just play with any cards you happen to pick up. Command.
Yeah, brand new Yu-Gi-Oh cards, dude. Hey, $900 for this one card.
They have pre-constructed commander decks that you can build, but almost any card is playable in the commander format. This proceeds to limited, which is a format where you have to bring literally nothing, but you do have to pay an upfront cost to play in a limited event. A limited event allows players to play with many cards that would not normally see play in constructed formats, as they are a lot weaker, but it also gives you an understanding of what the new cards coming out from Wizards of the Coast are at that moment.
That's actually interesting too, and you can tell like the difference in the development to each type of card that you're getting into, and it's like it still seems like it's not so overwhelming like the bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh cards that you see.
Limited is also noteworthy for the Magic the Gathering pre-releases, which happen before a set is released, allowing players to get access to the new cards a little bit before they would otherwise play it online or in person in standard tournament events. And finally, the big boy is the constructed formats like Standard, Modern, or Legacy. When these formats are played, these are for the more dedicated players to play, even though you can play them on a more casual level. Generally, if you're playing these formats, you can play in more constructed style events and tournaments that require a little bit more of a buy-in in terms of cards than the previous ones.
That's all very interesting. I didn't know that's how Magic worked, and I didn't know, like, the way that it was explained over here is, it seems like, and I don't know if anybody could shed some light in the comments down below, I would appreciate it. I don't know how big Magic is. I'm sorry, I know it's a big game, but I don't know to what extent like they continuously get new players. But this seems like a pretty solid way to get new players, and it's definitely a lot easier than Yu-Gi-Oh.
Progressing up this ladder is the only way to learn Magic, of course. However, by going in this sort of fashion, you have an easy way for players to slowly engage more and more with the community of Magic the Gathering and learn more and more about the cards that were printed and the cards that are going to see print in the future.
Yep, makes all sense.
It's also important to note that all of these are different valid stopping points if you really like to. If you don't ever want to play more the Commander, it is totally fine to continue engaging with Magic, only playing Commander, only playing Kitchen Table, only...
And it seems like it has a big audience for that as well, right? A bunch of people who just want to play Commander, a bunch of people who want to play limited constructed Kitchen Table. And I don't know if this is like terms that the creator of this video came up with or if that's actually like what Magic is, but regardless, it's very, very well done.
Playing limited. All of these being valid means that all your players have little communities that they can take a part of, but also progress from one to another as they please.
Very cool.
But let's say you're not satisfied with having all these different little communities. You don't want to cut your player base amongst many different groups and would rather keep everyone centralized in one main card game.
I see why you would want to, but I still think it's an excellent way to bring in new players from the sounds of it.
It's worth looking at Pokemon's approach, as Pokemon only has the one main format that every player plays as the standard format. One of the ways they keep it very accessible to new players is by printing very simple but powerful cards. Cards like Professor's Research and Super Rod are both very strong but have very basic abilities.
Yep, and again, the same kind of deal. It's actually, you don't have to like memorize an entire like Bible script in order to, have an understanding of a card. It seems like it's very simple. Discard your hand, draw 7 cards, shuffle up to 3 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile into your deck. Very, very simple. And it has another effect at the bottom, it looks like.
Having cards like this that seem really simple on the surface, discarding your hand to draw 7 cards, or shuffling 3 Pokemon or basic energy into your deck from your discard pile, they seem super basic and easy for new players to use. However, they show a lot of hidden depth when played at high levels.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
This level of easy to play and hard to master is really important when making your game very elegant and making it easy for new players to get into your game thinking it's relatively simple, but then only revealing the depth underneath once you play with a card a lot and realize that you can't play Professor's Research, discarding a key piece card from your hand, or need to save your Super Rod for when your Pokemon is knocked out to get a new chance at playing that Pokemon again.
Interesting. Okay, I'm kind of understanding, and this is coming from somebody who I've never played Pokemon. I've never played Magic the Gathering. From an outside perspective, both seem like a very nice way to introduce new players to the game. But I actually prefer, or I think the way that Magic does is a little bit better. But again, I understand not wanting to cut the player base, like the creator of this video has been talking about.
Only in Pokemon would you have a card like Lysandre's Trump card end up being banned, which seems like a totally rudimentary card. Shuffling your discard pile into your deck, including your opponent making it symmetrical, doesn't seem like a broken effect, but this card actually got banned in Pokemon due to its power level. By making your simple cards also overlap with your powerful cards, it leaves you a lot of room to introduce complexity into your game without overloading your players, especially your new players, with huge mechanics and lots of keywords.
And it seems like with all of these cards, they're very easy to understand. All you have to do is read a sentence or two, and then it's a lot easier to get into the game.
This helps Pokemon focus in on different Pokemon that may or may not be powerful enough. Pikachu in the games is completely horrible and sees basically no play. However, you can make a Pikachu that does tons of things in the card game because they have a ton of flexibility in terms of what mechanics they can put onto a Pikachu.
One day I need to sit down. I need to actually, I need to figure out how these games are played, to be honest with you, because again, they've had such great support for such a long time that it kind of makes me want to learn it a little bit.
But what if you want that complexity, that layer of depth underneath, the cards that don't look simple and are complicated but can be used in really interesting ways? What if you like the fast games in Yu-Gi-Oh! Want something that goes at a high pace, and you also like that interactive gameplay, the immediately getting to use something against your opponent from the very first turn of the game?
That's a toughie. I'm sure there's a lot of people, I'm sure, there is a lot of people that really, really do like complexity, but when you're first starting out a brand new game, I don't know if complexity is the way to go. And excuse me if you guys could hear my my notifications there.
My recommendation to you would just be playing the Edison format. The Edison format features a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh's best elements without overloading the new player experience.
No, but I don't know. Like, I think the best way to learn would be to play something like Goat format, something that is extremely simple. And you could, graduate your way up to Edison, kind of like Magic the Gathering, like it was explained.
Uses a lot of the basics from Yu-Gi-Oh! And doesn't overload the player with the amount that they need to learn. Blackwing Bow with the Spear is a card that special summons. However, there aren't that many cards that special summon in Edison, so it isn't overwhelming when you present a new player with a card that special summons itself.
Yeah.
It still features lots of staples from the anime, keeping it relevant, like cards like Mirror Force. It still features Synchro Summoning with cards
and again, it's very important to note when looking at all of these cards, it's very easy to understand. You have a couple, and this is the best way to get into it if you're talking about complex cards. or I mean, complex, depending on how you want to look at it. Like, you know what I mean? Because it can get a lot more complex, but it's more complex than the GOAT format. It's at least a little bit easier to understand, and there's not, you don't have to learn every single card under the sun.
Goyo Guardian dominating the format and being super powerful boss monsters that you can summon. It even features hand traps, which I genuinely dislike, but cards like DD Crow having a small enough effect that it's easy to understand when you need to use it against your opponent make it a great card to play. Edison format still feels powerful. It still feels like you're making impactful plays from the very first turn of the game. It still feels like you have powerful monsters you can special summon out, and still has the hand traps that Yu-Gi-Oh is known for.
Yeah, I would say that Edison is the most basic, complex part, if that makes sense. But people can absolutely get in and understand and play Edison. And Edison, and at the time when Edison was actually like in the present day, Yu-Gi-Oh was still getting a lot of new players. But I still think the best way to go about it is the way that Magic did. I think the best way to go about it nowadays is, okay, GOAT format and then graduate to Edison instead of throwing somebody into Edison.
However, it doesn't overwhelm new players by having a lot of cards with tons of words on them, a lot of deck searching, and a lot of mechanics that can overwhelm new players. This way, Edison becomes a format that is great for new players to get into and can still be entertaining for veteran players alike.
Agreed. That's fair.
But so far, I've only talked about other ways that the games have fixed this, so let's actually get around to fixing Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself in its current state. In my mind, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has two main issues which are easily solved by Konami and would massively improve the new player experience if they were solved.
Is it price and power creep? Like, I honestly, I think there is a lot more issues with the modern game, and you could boil it all down. If we're talking about new players actually getting into it, I think complexity is probably the biggest part.
And the first of these are the massive branching one-card combos.
Oh, yeah.
On cards like Snake Eye Ash, which can easily get you into a massive end board from a single card. Having generic search monsters like Snake Eye Ash get any level 1 fire monster from your entire deck and put it into your hand give your decks massive flexibility, as any level 1 fire monster in the entire game could...
And the problem with this is too, sorry, I cut him off the wrong part.
Go into your opponent's hand when they play down Snake Eye Ash, giving your opponent a huge amount of cards that they have to think about you possibly getting when you play it.
And you have to not only think about those cards, you have to learn and understand all of those other cards to, like, you know, properly maybe set up a defense or understand. You need to understand what your opponent's doing too. Why would they search this card and all of those different possibilities? You need to understand like every single deck, every single card, every single monster in the game in order to be competitive. I also think it's way too much, like, to branch off of the massive branching one card combos he's talking about. It's ridiculous how many different effects one card has.
This isn't even to mention a card like Small World, which can get you from one card to any other card in the entire game if you have the right card to bridge between the two. But in my opinion, the main problem with these kind of cards isn't the fact that they're really powerful, even if they are. It's the massive wall of text present not only on them, but on the cards they search.
And all of the different things that they do. Like I just said, there is so much that one singular card can do. It's not like we just took a look at with the Magic cards or even cards in the Edison format. Like, okay, DD Crow, quick effect, discard, banish. Simple, easy to understand. Look at all of the stuff that a new player has to learn when taking a look at even just these two example cards here. And this is like a vanilla example too.
A card like Bonfire looks like a really simple card that could be present in any game, only getting a level 4 or lower Pyro monster from your deck to your hand. But because of the way that Yu-Gi-Oh works, the Pyro monsters that you're going to search for often have a massive wall of text on themselves and may not even be played out after you search them, meaning that you have to not only remember what the card your opponent searched for did, but then also be ready for them to play down that card, which probably searches another card from their deck or special summon something from the graveyard that you now have to re-remember what it does.
And you're not going to, and no new player is going to be able to remember that. Like, it takes like God knows how long to play against all of the different cards and all the different decks that are out there. How long would you have to play to actually be able to remember this type of stuff? Because it's so much and it's so overwhelming.
It's pretty clear in my mind that at some point Konami switched from having a game that was about inconsistency yet powerful effects to having a game with a ton of consistency but having a massive amount of complexity tacked onto it after the fact. Because almost every deck in the game is built around cards which search their deck for other key elements of their own archetype, it is extremely hard for a new player that doesn't specifically know what that archetype does or is revolving around to know not only what the opponent is doing, but what they should even begin to do in response, making new players extremely confused and very likely to go and find a deck which only does one thing no matter what the opponent does, which really diminishes the amount of gameplay they will actually see from Yu-Gi-Oh!
That, and if, like, that was very well said, don't get me wrong, 100% very well said, and I'm not saying that I disagree with it. I just want to add to that a little bit. Like, if they're searching for, let's say, one card, every single time that they search, which they're going to be searching more and more and more, if you're not familiar with these cards, you're going to have to stop what you're doing, you're going to have to read it, you're going to have to try to remember it, as he said. and you're not going to be able to remember it, and it's going to get overwhelming as each single card you have to sit down, you have to read a complete giant wall of text, depending on how fast of a reader you are. You're not going to be able to remember any of it, and it's going to leave your memory immediately, and then we're going to have to take a look at another card. You're going to have to read that card, and that stops you from playing the game because you're trying to familiarize yourself with some of these cards.
And whilst I talk about the micro issue that's going on with Yu-Gi-Oh, I haven't gotten into the macro issue, which I believe is the second big problem that could easily be solved by Konami. And that's that there's no simple on-ramp to actually get you into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Outside of somebody showing you, which, as I said before, is a way that works for literally every game on the planet, so it shouldn't really be the default for Yu-Gi-Oh! There is no easy way to get into a game like Master Duel. They have the tutorial in Master Duel, which does show you the basics, what normal summoning is, what a spell card does, how a trap card works, how to synchro summon, how to...
But even all of that is already actually a lot to remember. And I don't know in comparison, like, how difficult those basics are in comparison to Pokemon and Magic, but I would imagine that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is still even more difficult.
XYZ summon, etc. But even with the astounding number of tutorials in Master Duel, it still really just goes over the basics of how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! On the fundamental level.
Yeah, so we're talking about something like GOAT format, right? And that does not apply to any of the new cards.
It also tries to introduce the archetypes to players, having these archetype spotlights that they can play through to get an idea of what every archetype in Yu-Gi-Oh! Does. But there's over 500 different archetypes present in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it would be completely unreasonable to expect a player to be able to know all of them.
And yeah, it's not like the archetypes from back in the day. Like if we want to talk about something like Edison format, something that's easy to understand, like what the Gravekeeper cards type to like want to do, it's just walls of text after walls of text after paragraph after paragraph.
And because in Master Duel, there's no real signification for what different archetypes are good or bad or see a ton of play or are very difficult, there's basically no way for a player to have any idea what they should play without asking somebody else. Meaning they're probably just going to pick a deck at random, whether or not the deck is good for new players or even something fun that they wouldn't want to play at all, or simply is completely unplayable in the meta at the time. They'll have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and there's basically no ropes to hold a player from falling off of Yu-Gi-Oh! Altogether.
And how could you possibly have fun learning that game? I do not understand, and I don't know. If there's anybody out there, I do not understand how Yu-Gi-Oh! Even, like, gets new players, if there is anybody actually getting into the game. I know it's a problem that the game isn't getting any new players, but, like, there's got to be some people learning the game, and I don't know why you would want to even do that at this point.
So let's address them. First is issue 1. I think Konami has already somewhat solved the issue about the massive amounts of searching and the huge text walls in Yu-Gi-Oh! By implementing different playable hand traps. A card like Nibiru or Droll and Lockbird definitely power down combo decks a large amount.
But the problem, like, this is, if you're brand new to the channel over here, I have been involved in hat format and below that. I loved the game at hat format, and I loved the game before that and all of the other eras. It's just I prefer something to the extent and the complexity of hat format. I don't like the idea of having all of these things like the links and the pendulums, the searching, and like all of these unnecessary additions to the game, in my opinion. Having that crazy power creep, and the answer to that is just to have a bunch of hand traps. I don't like hand traps either.
Massively limiting them on their ability to add cards to hand or to summon monsters to the field in a single turn, which makes it less likely opponents will be able to play against decks that do a massive summoning combo, especially if Droll and Nibiru become more prominent in the metagame. It's also prominent to note that they have also powered up hand traps over the years as they print new hand traps, which definitely helps with powering down the combo decks of
But that's the thing too, like, why I don't want to like flood my deck full of a bunch of hand traps and making sure that I'm stopping a bunch of other things instead of building a deck with like really cool cards that end up working together. I'm focusing on stopping my opponent from like playing the game and having like and participating within that like insane power that Konami has introduced to the game.
Originally, we only had the card like Effect Welder, which only stops one effect monster. Still a powerful effect nowadays. However, now we have cards like the Charmies, which come down and can draw you a large number of cards at a fair price.
Yeah, like look at the difference in the text there. Look at the complete difference.
These cards help focus on the main thing that the first issue is centering around, which is that the games need to see less cards in the first turn of the game. Having hand traps helps it so that way you can dilute your opponent's ability to play cards from their deck or cards from their hand in a single turn, making it much easier for you to focus on what you're trying to do rather than constantly thinking of what your opponent is. Having powerful hand traps not only makes it less likely for powerful decks that summon a lot or add a lot of cards from deck to hand to see tons of play in the metagame, meaning that new players will be less likely to run into them, but it also gives new players an easy way to understand the way to beat these decks.
The only other thing that I also don't like about this is I miss like when trap cards were really important. The hand traps kind of like Yeah, like, obviously, you'd rather play a hand trap than actual trap cards, but I miss trap cards being such a prominent thing within the game. Like, they're trap cards to stop your opponent from doing that stuff. I don't like that they're all monsters in the hand now.
If you want to beat a deck that special summons a lot, put some Nibiru's in your deck. If you need to beat decks that add a lot of cards to hand, put in a Droll. I will say, however, this is a really tough thing for Konami to balance easily. Being able to prevent your opponent from doing a large monster combo when that's the whole focus of their deck can end up being really bad, especially when it is prominent enough that all the decks end up playing all of the hand traps, but also play all of the enablers.
That's what I'm talking about, right? And that, in my opinion, takes away from the fun and the creativity of the game.
Meaning that the game still hasn't been made actually any simpler. You've just added a lot of cards that are like maxi into your game, which completely make non-games happen.
Actually, that's the perfect way to say it. I don't have anything to add to that point right there. I think he took the words like, I was having trouble articulating that thought, and he said it perfectly.
That being said, the addition of the mulch armies definitely shows me that Yu-Gi-Oh is walking in this direction of making more powerful hand traps that will hopefully help slow down the game in a meaningful way.
But I don't want the game like, this is why I like playing the other formats, because these things didn't just exist. Instead of like, we're constantly like, oh, nerf this, have this to go against this. I still don't like the fact that like these giant ridiculous combos are still a thing.
Now for the second issue, which also has already sort of worked and been done by Konami before. It's by using alternate apps like Duel Links or like Rush Duel to help players get into the game from the very start.
Now, if anybody could comment down below and shed some light on this, I would appreciate it. I don't know to what extent like these things work for getting new players. I don't know if like we've seen an uptick in people that have actually gotten involved with the game or not.
These games work a lot better as on-ramps to new players than Master Duel itself, even though Master Duel is the main way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! These games both do something really smart by having a completely different metagame from Yu-Gi-Oh! Altogether. And they also feature a lot of similar cards present from Yu-Gi-Oh!'s anime and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game itself.
Yeah, and that seems like an easy way to get into it, but would people really branch off of that and get into the complexity of the game as it is right now?
By doing this, these games can both straddle the line between being a main Yu-Gi-Oh! Element, but also being something different that is friendly to new players. That way you don't have to upset the entire ecosystem of Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself, but can still introduce new players to the game in a meaningful way.
I mean, yeah, you know what? I never really thought about that. I guess at least they're trying a little bit. I just, again, don't know to what extent that's working.
By still featuring a similar way of playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That players are familiar with from when they played back in the school ground days, it makes it easier for new players to get into the game as it looks familiar to what they are used to. However, these games still implement higher combo enablers and new mechanics to make it a little more complex, so that way players will have something more to engage with in the main game of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, but, and again, I would need to, maybe I'm speaking from ignorance because I don't play these two, but is it like even comparable, the level of complexity to the game right now? I highly doubt it, and it's still probably going to be a ridiculous shock, but at least they'd be coming into a game understanding like the basics of the basic.
Seeing something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist really gives me hope that there are people who still want to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, remember watching the anime of the kid, and would love to get into the game if only there was some sort of bridge that would take them from a game like Legacy of the Duelist to the actual game of Master Duel.
Maybe they just need to like focus on online games more often and like, hey, you know what? Hey, we have an online format. Like, I personally like using Dueling Nexus, and that's where I play Edison. It's a very, very easy browser game. It's easy for me to log on. It's a game that I know how to play. Just add all of the formats to something like that, and like, hey, come play the GOAT format. And the GOAT format did bring a lot of players like back to the game, and a lot of people really do love that. But I think that's probably a better way to get into it. From GOAT format to Edison format, and then go all the way up to whatever you want. Have literally every format in, I believe they call it Time Wizard formats, but the retro formats, whatever it's end up calling, like, have all of the prominent ones available for people to graduate to if they want to play a more complex version of the game.
This is the ideal product in my mind to get a new player into the game. A different version of Yu-Gi-Oh! That is much more simplified and easy for players who are very, very fond of the old Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime to get into, but still have that bridge over to the real game or to Master Duel in some way.
You know, they could just introduce a new anime show, because I know that they haven't done that in a long time. Like, the reason that I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Initially is because of the anime show, and I'm sure that a lot of people could relate about that too.
The one thing all of these titles are really missing out of, in my opinion, is some bridge to Master Duel or the real game altogether. Some way where it goes from playing the regular game of Duel Links to an easy crossover into playing the actual game of Yu-Gi-Oh! In paper or playing the game on Master Duel.
I don't think there is, though. Like, the game is so ridiculous to the point where I don't think that you actually could build a bridge somehow.
Your collection carryover, having you get some sort of currency in Duel Links that carries over to you getting packs in the real world. These are some things that other card games do and would definitely make it way easier for you to get into the actual game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Than just if you were to play Legacy of the Duelist online and then be like, okay, that's enough, I'm done with Legacy of the Duelist, and then not picking up Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever again.
Yeah, I think the way to do it is the way that Magic did, or he described how Magic ends up doing it, except have all of those formats like baby steps, take some baby steps all the way up to the modern game.
I think it's worth noting that doing these things won't solve everything for Yu-Gi-Oh! The new player experience is incredibly nuanced and takes a lot of work to put in to get new players into the game, and doing these things will not simply solve every new player problem. There's many other things that you could do to help the game that will help solve the new player issues other than the ones I've listed here. That being said, it's clear, at least in my mind, that Konami is trying to take steps in the right direction to make the new player experience better.
But then again, they do something like that you have everybody happy with all the old formats, and then you have to use the updated versions of all of those cards. So it seems like they're taking a step backwards with that, but maybe they just, we've seen this type of thing with Konami before. Maybe they just want to like have their own way to do it.
For example, taking cards like Maxi, which are present in Master Duel, and replacing them with the Mulcharmies, which are pretty clearly styled after a card like Maxi, but more balanced, really show that Konami has in mind what they want to do with hand traps without overpowering the game altogether.
Really, maybe it's because I'm not keeping up as much anymore, but it feels like, from speaking from experience with Konami, man, I've been not like personally dealing with them, but you get my point. After being involved with this game in Konami for years upon years, I get the idea that they just don't care.
It may seem like Konami
that might have changed.
Has it out for the game as it's been around so long and still has this new player experience. And even when they do blunder by ruining the Time Wizard rules for some reason.
Yeah, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But that's not even just like a blunder. That's just like, are you trying to kill your game?
Rolling it back a few days later after everyone freaks out on Twitter.
Oh, they rolled it back? Oh, never mind. I thought that was a permanent change. Forget everything that I said.
It's important to remember that it's clear that they do want to improve the game and make it better for not only new players, but old players alike. So I do think that when you voice your opinion, it is really important to give it to Konami, tell them what we want, and tell them what they can help to do to make new people come into the game.
And it's important to voice that opinion in a nice, critical, healthy a healthy criticism is very important, and not what people on Twitter do, going, wah, Konami's an idiot, everybody works with Konami's an idiot, Yu-Gi-Oh's bad. Like, no, you need to voice your opinions, voice the problems in a healthy critique.
So go out and make your voice heard. Maybe down in the comments down below this video, you can let me know how you'd help Yu-Gi-Oh's new player experience.
And yeah, I thought that he brought up some excellent points, and I thought that he brought up some pretty fun ways to maybe get brand new people to the game. And it was interesting learning about how Pokemon and Magic do it, because I think that's obviously a lot easier than Yu-Gi-Oh! But I would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below as well. Please go show the creator to this video some support in the pinned comment description down below. But if you are already subscribed, then why don't you check out this other reaction video that we did on the channel. I would love to have you over there. Thank you so much for being here and watching the video, everybody. Take care, guys.